Yeah. Okay, welcome everyone. This is an ad hoc meeting of a subgroup of the technical advisory group for the Clean Heat Standard. We are here to talk today about what coordination of this Clean Heat Standard with other programs looks like and what we might want to say to the PUC about that this week. I'm Rick Weston. I'm chair of the TAG, and I'm chairing this meeting. And the object here will be to give us enough feedback, input today, so that I might be able to draft in the next 2 days a 1 or 2 pager. I hope it can be short, but we'll see. That would act as a draft of a statement that the TAG may want to approve and send to the PUC on Thursday's meeting, if we can do it. That's the hope here. I ask that members of the TAG, and in this case, folks who are as well coming in on behalf of their organizations that are members of the TAG, keep your video on if you can, and that everyone stay muted when you're not speaking, and members of the public who are observing, keep your videos off. We don't use the chat except for as needed posting links in it. So with that in mind, we will start. I don't have a set agenda on this. As I say, what I hope to do is get sufficient input from you all so that I can draft something. We're going to start with a little background from Emily Roscoe and EVT, and then we'll go from there and see where it takes us. Now, let me just start with my impression of what coordination with other programs means, and it's certainly open to interpretation. For me, it is, how does the CHS interact with other formal, administratively determined, provided programs to deliver heating and thermal efficiency and other kinds of energy efficiency services to Vermonters in their residences and businesses. But if you have other ideas, let's talk about them today, about what that really means. We do know from the statute that Tier 3 efficiency investments and other such things are eligible to earn or create clean heat credits. So with that in mind, and we've spoken to this point, at least in some part, in the ownership statement that we submitted to the PUC a month or so ago. So with that, does anybody have anything he wants to say before I hand over to Emily Roscoe? Great.
Rick?
Yeah.
Rick, one quick question. This is Matt. Apologize for being off camera, driving.
No, I understand.
When you say programs, are we referring to anything that incentivizes or encourages Vermonters to take a clean heat action or measure? Is that how a rough definition?
Well, I would say that's consistent with what I just said. Yes, that's, I suppose, how I see it. But that's the discussion. If we think there's more to it or less to it, we should have that discussion. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Emily, you're up.
Thanks, Rick. We have Dave Westman here from Efficiency Vermont as a participant. And we had talked about the importance of having a discussion around the baseline of existing programs. So if it makes sense for you, Dave, I'll hand it off to you to share what you were thinking around that.
Right. Let me just, Dave, I'm assuming what you're going to give us is a description of what's going on in Vermont right now.
I could do that. Sure.
Did you have something else in mind?
No, not really. That makes sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have said consistently the in this case is that there's a lot of clean heat measures being installed today. Those measures are being supported by incentives that are paid for by electric ratepayers through the energy efficiency charge. They are paid for in part by incentives through distribution utility tier 3 programs. There's weatherization agencies work with low income communities. There's a lot of clean heat measures that are being deployed today. And so I appreciate this conversation, Rick, because it really is paramount in understanding how the clean heat um, rule, the clean heat system, the clean heat market, the clean heat credits. It's paramount to understanding how all of those things will work in the context of everything that came before it. And I think that is why it's really important for us to get this right. And Efficiency Vermont, BEIC, we've had the position coming into this proceeding that the clean heat standard should not do harm to the existing programs, because the existing programs are really the backbone and the support for meeting the state's thermal reduction targets, the weatherization goals, the greenhouse gas reduction requirements. It's really, so the existing programs are really, really important. And I don't have much more to say other than knowing that when we make comments and when we represent as Efficiency Vermont or VEIC believes, the following, it's because we are trying to maintain that position of protecting ratepayer value for the investments that have been made in the existing programs, as well as our stakeholders and our partners in distribution utilities and our partners at the weatherization agencies and the like, who, we know how complicated it is to run these current programs with a nearly unlimited stakeholder list. And, we really want the clean heat standard and the clean heat market and the clean heat credits to support the existing activities and to grow these programs' impact with the backbone of these existing programs. So, my first suggestion, Rick, is that we create a greenhouse gas accounting of the existing programs as a starting point to know exactly what the weatherization services, what the tier 3 programs, what the Efficiency Vermont programs, and all of the other programs that I'm, not naming here, but I know they're out there. I would love to get a sense of what that annual greenhouse gas reduction amount is that the clean heat standard is then meant to build off of. That's how this has always sort of been described to us, is that clean heat standard is meant to include all of those things, right? In the Venn diagram of clean heat, it encompasses all of the existing programs and more so. And so that's really what I kind of come into this conversation wanting to kick off, and what Emily and I talk about when we're not in tag meetings, is how do we characterize, how do we quantify what the current impact of existing programs are, so that we know exactly how much new program activities need to be driven by this clean heat market into the future, because we're not starting from ground zero. We're starting from a very strong backbone, and that's what I wanted to start off with.
Let me ask a question, and I do want certainly to open this up for broader discussion. I've got a couple of questions. First one is, how would you propose going about who should take that responsibility? If this is the first action, if the tag says to the PUC, the first thing that needs to happen is to figure out what we're getting in the way of savings from existing programs, so that we know what the the incremental need from the CHS is. How should that be done? Who should do it? Does it, well, it certainly would require, it seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, some way of, well, we want to be registering what we're already doing, as you say, and knowing how many potential credits are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every one of these programs has annual reports. So I would argue that it wouldn't be us, but we have several technical contracts in place, both in the Clean Heat Standard and the Climate Council and the like, is that I think what we should recommend is that those annual reports for certainly the DU Tier 3 programs, certainly the 3 EEU programs run by BED, VGS, and Efficiency Vermont, all of those reports can be tabulated. And then, if it's not a direct reportable number, I know Efficiency Vermont reports out in greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that'll be an easy one on our end. But I think that if you had a group or a contract to run those numbers so that we knew where the starting line was, that would be a pretty straightforward first step.
What about weatherization?
I'm not as familiar with how OEO reports their projects, but we generally know that a weatherization project reduces between 8 to 12 MMBTUs per year. So I think that, and those numbers are frankly small enough that you can make an estimate, and you can just say, like, okay, we'll call it 8, we'll call it 10, call it something. But I know the OEO reports out on the number of homes and units that have been weatherized.
Okay, great. I'm going to turn over in a moment to Ken and then Matt. One thing I should have said earlier is, as we have this conversation, let's identify in broad brushstrokes the however many, maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe whatever number of activities or elements of coordination that we want to talk about, that we want to, that we think means something. So what I'm hearing from you, Dave, is first thing we need to do is find out what we're already saving. That's number one. Are there other elements of coordination? And I'm thinking of some administrative matters, but there may be others as well. So if we can identify what would be the 5 bullet points. Again, I'm trying to be practical here, because I'm going to write this up and I want to be able to hand it back to the TAG for its review in a couple days.
Rick, there are other hands up, but I want to offer a friendly amendment.
Okay.
To your word coordination, because I think it's really important. All of these programs coordinate with each other, and in fact, my colleagues at the Department of Public Service will often hound us to make sure that we are coordinating, especially as new programs get launched. There's more than just coordination. There is also programs that rely upon each other. It is very true that the distribution utility Tier 3 programs are built off of EEU infrastructure. It's also true that our EEU programs are built off of OEO and weatherization agency structure. So there are a lot of interrelated and coordinate, more than coordination, but actually programs that are sort of intertwined, is what I think I'm trying to say.
Okay, great. Thanks. Ken, you
Yeah,
and
Dave,
Matt.
Dave made a statement that I think is really important, and that is that you currently report greenhouse gas reductions. And so that suggests to me that in terms of characterizing specific actions, we'll use heat pumps as an example, that you folks have a specific factor and specific parameters around heat pump installations that lead to that calculation. So and that's going to be a critical piece of the clean heat standard, is that every heat pump installation, whether it be an Efficiency Vermont supported one or by someone else, has this credit value. So, it's going to happen pretty soon that the characterization work comes out, and that, I guess I seek your reaction, but I think we need to make sure that there's, absolute consistency between the way you calculate greenhouse gas reduction for the installation of a measure and what the clean heat standard measures as the number of credits for that same measure. And I don't know how much that has been discussed or teed up for the work of the consultants as an example, but as we move forward.
Ken, all of those characterizations are completed based off of how the measure was characterized in the technical resource manual, which in the EEU tag is the responsibility for VEIC as the implementer of Efficiency Vermont, does the lion's share of that characterization. So I think it is accurate to say that every clean heat measure will need to be characterized for ultimately what becomes the basis for a claimed credit. And as we know, the law states that the credit is, I'm going to miss the word here precisely, but it's basically a proxy for GHG reductions, right? And so that's why, and everything's based around GHG reductions. We can sell 1 million credits, we can sell 10 credits. It won't matter if it's not hitting the greenhouse gas reduction targets set by the statute. So that's why I'm suggesting we just use our existing measure characterization. You don't need to get into the whole, what does the credit mean? How much is a credit worth? You don't need to worry about that, because right now we're still just trying to understand what is the GHG impact of the existing programs. That's where I'm suggesting we start from.
Okay, Matt Coda?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is the point in the tag meeting where everyone can tap a drink of their beverage, because this is where Matt says, once again, that this is not an electrification program. If it were, it'd be a lot simpler. But the point of this is to characterize not just electrification or measures that are done with the distributed utilities or the efficiency utility, but those clean heat measures that are currently unregulated and are not counted. So to say that all clean heat measures are reported with annual reporting and all this is counted, that doesn't exist for biofuels. Nor will it exist for future programs that heating contractors and heating fuel dealers who install heat pumps might do, in addition to existing or future rebates or incentives for heat pumps. So if we're talking about credit ownership and making sure that when the earning of credits, to say that it's already been coordinated, it's already being done. No, there's a big gap in that. And I fear that the gap is so big that people will forget that this is not an electrification program. This is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we have an entire swath of homeowners, 100,000 homes that use heating oil that can adopt biofuels that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that are already doing it and perhaps can do it faster, but yet we have no accounting for that now, and that needs to change.
Well, so let me, thank you, Matt. So I actually appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think that was the intent of the discussion at this point, but I want to make sure what you're saying then is that for the purposes of coordination with other programs, the particular task that the tag has been given under the statute, you're saying that current sales of biofuels and renewable fuels and so on need to be treated as a program for the purposes of coordination. I'm being a little, narrow here, Matt, just because I want to make sure that we are able to, say something of use to the PUC.
Yeah, my pushback is, so often this is viewed as a straight electrification program, and my view is completely different. I agree with a lot of what David was saying, but I think that there's a tendency to think, oh, this is just about raising money from the sale of fossil fuels to incentivize the installation of heat pumps. And yes, there will be some of that, but that is not entirely how we get to the mandates in the Global Warming Solutions Act. We get there through a range of measures, including weatherization, including heat pumps, including modern wood heating, including biofuels. And so there is much work to be done, important work to be done, to account for where those renewable fuels are replacing fossil fuels and what benefit that has to the environment in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And the utilities aren't doing that. Efficiency Vermont certainly isn't doing it, but we need to do it.
Thanks, Matt. Got it. Barry Murphy? And then Dave Westman.
I was actually just going to touch on a couple of points that both Ken and Matt have made there, and somewhat to the same point that Dave was making. It's kind of standardization of kind of calculation methodology of what it is you're going to be able to calculate for your greenhouse gas reductions. It's got to be the same across all the programs, whether it be electrification, whether it be biofuels or anything else, because you've got to be able to measure it using the same set of assumptions. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, because then you've got things that have different values essentially that you're trying to say are the same, and they're just not. The other piece of coordination, obviously, is we have 3 technical resource manuals, possibly more in the future, who knows? All of which are kind of built to be somewhat complementary because they all use the same basis, which more or less seems to be the EU TRM, which evolved into the Tier 3 TRM with specific exempt differences. And obviously now we have the Clean Heat Standard TRM. And if all of these programs are going to be generating clean heat credits, whenever one is updated, then that update has to flow through to the other ones. And that's going to require a certain level of coordination between all the tags and all the kind of parties that are going to be looking at these, just to make sure that things remain consistent across the board. Otherwise, you get into the kind of dueling methodologies and dueling savings, potential savings as a result of having different approaches. So that was my 2 cents for that particular piece.
Oh, very helpful. Precisely the kind of bullet points I'm looking for. So thank you. Dave Westman.
Thanks. I wanted to reflect a little bit on what Matt was saying, because I think what I'm suggesting is actually very consistent with what Matt is pointing out, which is that the programs that do delivered, either do delivered services or have incentives for installed measures, generally do have reportable reports. They have reports that can be searchable, and you can do the type of analysis that I was just suggesting. Whereas obviously Matt's delivered fuels, we would not have a good record of that, and I fully acknowledge that. And I guess it's hard to think about that in the. I'm going to say something that's going to be hard to think about in the present, because there's so much that needs to happen all at once right now. But I'm kind of thinking, like, how would a mature sort of understanding of this system work? Is that we know what the current programs are doing today. We know what kind of effort is being put into them, i.e. budget. And then we also know how does the market react to those programs. So we know the number of units and everything else based on that budget. So you basically get $1 per project level analysis. And that's kind of where our understanding of the market sort of ends. And that's why we have a potential study that is a requirement of the Clean Heat Standard to basically say, here's everything that's out there, and here's what is readily available, and here's what is program achievable. And those three different assessments in the potential study are really important for setting a understanding of program activity, because that potential study might say you can only do 10% more weatherization projects based on your current workforce. You might only be able to do a 5% increase in heat pumps and even then that's if you pay for the whole thing, and that might be cost prohibitive. yeah, the potential study is meant to inform what is the reality of existing programs and how much more can they actually do within a reasonable budget. I think what we saw previously, and I wasn't there, I was reading the notes, but I think what we saw from that potential study was what is the max achievable, or what is the policy achievable, what's needed to meet the policy goals. We still don't actually know what program achievable amounts would be. And so to that point that Matt's raising, I guess, is that what is that gap, like, between what the potential study identifies as a program achievable amount of activity versus what the clean heat market, clean heat standard, clean heat requirements, whatever you want to call it. What needs to fill the rest of that gap? And that could very well be biofuels, or it could be something else, but probably biofuels.
Gotcha. Okay, this is helpful to me as a bullet point. What you and Matt are saying is, it seems to me you're making a point about coordination that has, as you say, has to do with budgeting, what we can expect, where we're going to need to look for additional savings, that sort of thing. I get it, and I'll try to characterize that in the write-up. Matt, your hand is still up. Do you have another comment?
No, sorry, I'll lower it. Thank you.
Quite all right. No. Ken Jones.
Yeah, I'm on the Science and Data Subcommittee of the Climate Council, and I believe this is another piece of coordination. It's not clear. Well, I think it is clear to me, actually, that the estimates used for their planning may be quite different. And so I would encourage us, because I do think as we know, Clean Heat Standard is based on helping us meet the Global Warming Solutions Act thermal sector target. That target is also a foundation for the Climate Action Plan. And I guess I'll say I'm a little concerned that if we don't speak the exact same language and use the same data, that their planning work may be inconsistent with what we're doing. And I think the repercussions are, we probably are going to need them to identify supplemental programs in order to keep the Clean Heat Standard process affordable through the 2050 time period. I mean, I don't want to, we don't need to argue about that at some point, but I think that theme of consistency in the analysis between what we do and what they're using to plan for the future is very important, and I don't believe it exists today.
And thank you, Ken. I want to be clear. When you say they who are putting together the Climate Action Plan, who exactly? You gave a title for the group.
Yeah, so the Climate Council is the
Yep.
umbrella, and
Yep.
under the Climate Council is the Science and Data Subcommittee that oversees the analysis. And prior, so I was pretty aware of the prior analysis. And as I say, it was rather different than information that we're looking at, using things from like the Technical Resource Manual. They have different assumptions, and they have different projections in terms of energy use, and very different.
Okay.
Which is one reason, just so you know, which is one reason why early, I think it was this year, I lose track. The Agency of Natural Resources assumed they're going to meet their 2025 target, and they're not.
Okay.
And that's what we have to work with. If we're going to meet the target, then why bother? And we clearly have to bother because we're not going to meet the target.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, that's another point of coordination. And by the way, I don't think that what we say on this question of coordination, again, you tell me if I'm wrong, and the tag can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think that we need to solve all the coordination problems immediately. I don't think we can necessarily, but I think it is, I think we'll have will have begun, a productive move down this path if we are able to identify where we think the key points of coordination and consistency should be found and should be assured. Others' thoughts? Okay. I don't think this is, I didn't expect this call to end right now, but let me just say again that what I'd like to do, and we'll see how the tag as a whole feels about it, is to put together a 1 or 2 pager on the basis of this conversation that raises lists the points that you all have made and essentially gives the PUC our shared vision for where coordination amongst existing and maybe yet to be created programs lies. I don't have much more to say about that at this point, except to try to draft some text for you all, which I'd like to get to you in a day or two if I can. If there's something that we think we're missing, I'd like to take some moments now to identify it.
Rick, I think what a lot of us on this call are also anticipating this becomes critical for the program at a whole is how does a clean heat market support all of the actors who are working on a single project. I'm suggesting that we do a baseline analysis first, because I think we will very quickly realize that sometimes we count the same things. And that is precisely, back to that Venn diagram, precisely what the Clean Heat Standard was intended to do, which was encompass all existing programs and allow all the existing architecture to remain in place, but to grow the current programs to create a whole raft of new ones in biofuel deliveries, and maybe bring clean heat installed measures to the state that we don't even know about today. But I guess the question that we all want to know is, what is the process for all of those parties to sort of be recognized in that market for the existing incentives? So, right now, and this is all consistent with filings that Efficiency Vermont's already made, but we have a clause in our thermal contracts that whether you're a vendor or a customer receiving an Efficiency Vermont incentive, or a distribution utility incentive, you are passing any environmental or energy saving attributes on to Efficiency Vermont, and then we pass those on to distribution utilities if they're a tier 3 program. But that is, in a sense, it's a financially worthless promise today, because no one's going to claim those energy or environmental attributes other than Efficiency Vermont or a distribution utility. But this market makes that attribute something potentially valuable. And it is a central part of this question with stakeholders right now as to how those energy and environmental attributes get broken out by both the current program implementers as well as future entrants to the programs. And I'll just say, the heat pump installers right now pass on that Efficiency Vermont incentive through what we call a midstream rebate. The customer doesn't get a check from Efficiency Vermont anymore. They just get the cost of the project written down. And it does sort of feel like in the clean heat marketplace, everyone was promised a credit for participating in a project, and yet ultimately each project is only going to yield a finite amount of credits. And we've talked about this, and I know Matt and I have talked about this at length already. So I think the real question, so right now, Efficiency Vermont is in the position of saying, like, the commission's order said that all credit formation starts at the customer's premise for an installed measure. And so we're assuming then that, what that order means is that the commission is intending to roll out a rule where installed measures, the credit formation starts at the customer, and that if we want to claim that credit, we're going to have to come up with some type of, multilateral or bilateral agreement with our existing partners. And we're going to wait for the final rule, obviously, before those agreements get negotiated. But that's our current understanding of it. And I guess the question that I have is, what does the tag really need to weigh in on as far as that goes? But it's a huge part of how this is going to actually get implemented.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ken, but I'll just say that, and I believe we've already weighed in on that, at least in some measure. So,
Okay.
there may be nothing more at this point we need to say, but
Okay.
that's a question. Okay, that's fair. I mean, you're raising it, Ken, and then Matt.
Well, I want to follow up on that point because while we weighed in, I don't think we weighed in on the sort of the technical pieces that I think Dave's kind of highlighted, that homeowners there is no database of homeowners. It's Efficiency Vermont has the number of activities that it's participated in through its incentive program. And in many cases that overlaps with the tier 3. So that exists. So in terms of analysis, to somehow base it on the homeowner's action will be really hard. And so that folks may know, that's one reason why I was pretty clear that I did not think starting with a homeowner was a good idea in terms of ownership, but because of that analytic reason. But what I wanted to bring up here are two other coordination things. One of them's really hard, which is, I think it's in the weatherization world more than perhaps some of the other installed measures, and certainly in the delivery of renewable lower carbon fuels. So I'll start with that one. There's Black Bear in Plainfield. They sell biodiesel, and I don't know how they are supposed to participate. And they're an example. There may be others in the state. I don't know how they're supposed to participate. We don't know their volumes. And that's one. But the other, I'll ramp up here. The other is weatherization. I believe there is an appreciable, maybe significant level of weatherization that does not go through Efficiency Vermont. I'm in the real estate business, and we work with clients, and sometimes they just hire a contractor. Maybe all contractors have a relationship with Efficiency Vermont. I've heard, though, that some do not. And so how we're able to capture their activity in terms of understanding this baseline, but also in terms of promoting the movement to a clean heat standard so that they can participate meaningfully and provide the proper price incentive to their customers. I think that's a piece of coordination. I don't know how to do it. It's not a state program kind of by definition. And then the third piece is, I know other people have considered how this works, and maybe they have some ideas, but it's LIHEAP. When we help a homeowner decrease its reliance upon fuels, whether it's through weatherization or whether it's through improved efficiency, like putting in a heat pump, hot water heater, or heat pump, that assists that homeowner in a way that takes burden off of LIHEAP. So is there a way to include LIHEAP as an active partner so that synergy is productive and we're really maximizing efficiency? Again, I don't know. I know the discussion about how to work with LIHEAP has been taking place for years. Maybe folks have some good examples, but I just want to make sure that we're at least exploring that potential partnership to maximize economic efficiency.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to come back after Matt speaks to your point about Black Bear. I'm not sure I understand. I just want to come back to it. So Matt, you're up.
Yeah, just to tag off on what David said, and I agree with what he was saying for the most part. Just wanted to add on that, representing the heating and cooling contractors, there is lots of possibilities. And maybe this is what David was referring to when he said do no harm to existing programs. But there are a lot of creative capitalists who are following what we're doing and see a tremendous opportunity to reject efficiency Vermont's midstream rebate and have an economic incentive, may have an economic incentive to do so. There are activities that aren't being funded through weatherization or through efficiency Vermont that would qualify as clean heat measures that might have a higher dollar value than anything written. So the whole concept is, if efficiency Vermont owns every environmental attribute for now and for the future, there are a lot of creative capitalists that will figure out a way to bypass that. So this is going to be an interesting process.
Okay. Okay. Got it. I hope I get it. Ken, your example about black bears, is there something unique about the way a company like that delivers bio and renewable fuels? I'm wondering if I missed what you were.
Well, I don't believe it's captured in any of our data. So it's those are now creditable in 2026. If that's the first obligation year, that will be a creditable activity. We don't know that baseline. We don't know the volume of those credits, and we therefore don't know how to include them in sort of the economic model so that they receive an appropriate benefit because they're doing creditable activity.
My confusion here is really basic. I'm sorry, I'm going to embarrass myself. But are they not a company that's just represented by Matt? In other words, are you talking about all fuel dealers? Or are you talking about a specific kind of?
All they sell is biodiesel.
Oh, all they sell is. Oh, I see. Okay, got it.
So they wouldn't be on the registry because the registry is for fossil sellers.
Right. Got it. Got it. Oh, I misunderstood. Okay, thank you. Okay, got it. Any other thoughts from anyone?
Rick, I just put in the chat the information that Deirdre had provided on referencing the Act 18 on this issue. And one of the things that I think we've already started to talk about, but it also talks about federal programs, which raises another whole set of incentives. I mean, somebody who just put in a heat pump is going to get my tax credit. Is that something that it has to be tracked and determined outside of all the other state program incentives? So just throwing that out there. I'm not sure what the answer is.
Okay, let's identify it at the very least.
Rick, I wanted to just acknowledge that what Ken said about weatherization going on in the state that we don't even know about is a totally fair observation. We weatherize to a very specific standard. We use the term home performance with Energy Star because that's a set of standards that involves levels of insulation, levels of air sealing. It is in effect an assurance of quality and comprehensiveness. You do not need that assurance of comprehensiveness to go to the Home Depot and buy 5 or 6 rolls of R20 and install it yourself. But it's not assured that you get an Efficiency Vermont incentive by doing that. We have standards that need to be met. A lot of those standards have been, good and welcome and, pushed on by regulators to make sure that, the ratepayer funds are being used for projects that create real energy savings as well. So I don't know if we have I don't know if the tag has ever spent time talking about that as far as like minimum standards go, but like, you know, we have baselines, we have, you know, we don't achieve savings. Um, Even if, you know, we take energy code into consideration, you know, there's like a whole system in place, and that's kind of speaking to why the sort of consistency across technical resource manuals is important, because, you know, speaking of entrepreneurial capitalists that Matt was thinking of, you know, if the clean heat standard requirements are less rigorous than what the existing programs are, then absolutely people are going to be taking the shortcut to those less rigorous programs because those will cost less. So in effect, Matt, yes, that is one way that I would say clean heat standards should not do harm to the existing programs.
Okay, got it, Dave. Yeah, I think, boy, that goes to a question. I think the way you're putting it is, I mean, if I can restate what you just said, is there's going to be a question about what constitutes a creditable activity and how it's judged and how it's you know, vouched for. Yeah. Okay. Matt, your hand is up still. It's all right. It's all right. Do you have more?
Sorry, driving. And
No, it's okay. No, it's okay.
all right.
Don't apologize. I appreciate that. Okay. Matthew, Baker Pool.
Yeah, this one just came back into my mind. I had a conversation, I don't remember with who, about whether or not a building that is high efficiency is going to earn credits for avoided emissions if the building code, so this is another state policy and program interaction, if the building code becomes a net zero requirement, whether or not, you know, meeting the minimum requirement at that point, once it's enacted, it's a minimum, is creditable. I think since the purpose of this clause we're talking about is additionality, I would say probably yes. But I think maybe the tag would want to express an opinion on that. Yeah.
Are we expecting that to happen anytime soon?
Barry may actually know the answer to that.
So we have a goal of, let me make sure I parse my words here very carefully. Net zero ready by 2030 for our next iteration of energy codes. So that basically means we're not going to be requiring net zero, but basically the thinking is the building shell and mechanicals, etc., will be of high enough standard that you could put yet to be determined an amount of solar or wind or whatever onto your phone that you would effectively become net zero at that point. But we're not going to be requiring at this point of our thinking any of those renewables to be installed.
Right. Okay. Gosh, you guys, you folks are giving me a lot to work with. What I promise that whatever you see from me in the next couple of days will need a lot of work. Okay, Luce.
Hi, good afternoon. Just thinking about, you know, Efficiency Vermont, what Dave was saying, how the weatherization component and how do you confirm that they've done it properly? And at the same time, I've always been thinking about, Rick, how we're trying to encourage more people to go into the business, right? We don't have enough HVAC installers. We don't have enough weatherization contractors. So how can they keep the credits themselves, the workers putting it in, or at least a part of the credit, be certified by Efficiency Vermont, and that way encourage more workforce development. So it's just something, you know, I know it's not the coordination, but it sort of is related, is how can we get that so that it's all pooled together and we get more people interested in doing the actual work, because we know it's going to keep increasing, right? I mean, we hope that's the goal.
Right. Okay.
And I guess it's not clear to me after hearing everybody how we are going to coordinate all these different initiatives into one. And bless you, Rick, for trying to pull this all together, because there's a lot going on. And I don't understand from Ken, why is there a different format for the subcommittee from the Vermont Climate Council? Like they're using different data? Is that what I heard you say?
Yep,
So how is that happening?
that's a great
Okay.
question.
Okay,
Yeah, which really means at this point, we're going to be primarily identifying where there are really important disjunctions, and where what we're calling coordination, is really going to need to have some attention paid to it. Okay. Are there other thoughts from any of the TAG members and their representatives? If not, we've set aside time for 90 minutes, and we obviously don't have to go there. We do have 6 more minutes, and at least in an hour, and we have some members of the public on the line, and I would be happy to hear any thoughts from them in the next 6 minutes. So if there's anyone who's been sitting in, listening in, and has some ideas that we might want to take into account, I'm happy to hear them. We're happy to hear them. Okay. Well, look, folks, I'm going to try to put something together that we can chew on before Thursday and on Thursday. I promise you that it will fall short of expectations, but with your good input in the next few days, we'll have something that we can work on. I really appreciate it. And anybody feel free to drop me a line or an email that might help me think about some of these things. If there's wording that you think might be helpful. I'm going to try to keep this short and punchy, but we'll see. With that, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for your thoughtful and informative comments.
Thanks, Rick. Look forward to seeing the draft.
Take care. Thank you all.